Alright friends, we're going to talk about how to fix really pesky color casts. So in this image I have done I did my raw edits in Adobe Camera Raw, threshold, find my dark and light pixels, black and white point curve to set the value of the dark and light pixel, luminosity curve to adjust contrast without changing the color, and then hue saturation to go in and change individual colors to my liking. But sometimes that's not enough, and sometimes you end up with just kind of a weird color cast over your photos. This next step is really helpful too if you're a little bit off in that raw editing of your white balance, right? If you didn't maybe adjust your white balance as perfectly as you could have in Adobe Camera Raw, this is one way where you can kind of fake it a little bit, but you wouldn't want to do the heavy lifting with this next step. This is like really just to dial it in how you want it. So this photo to me, I mean I like it, but it just seems like it just has this kind of like aqua hue over it that it's just too much for me. So I'm going to go, and I would do this in order right after the hue saturation. If I still haven't gotten rid of this, I would go color balance. So layer, new adjustment layer, color balance. I'm going to hit that. Just hit OK. All right, so now I have a color balance layer on top of hue saturation. Hue saturation is the best way to adjust individual colors. Okay, especially just using the saturation on the global level. That's perfect. You wouldn't want to. This is not you wouldn't want to use color balance instead of hue saturation. It's in addition to hue saturation. Okay, because it is. We see just right here we have three sliders: cyan to red, magenta to green, yellow to blue. Okay, we're not getting rid of or increasing one color. We're balancing between yellow or blue. We're balancing between magenta and green. We're balancing between cyan and red. These are all opposing colors on the digital color wheel. So you kind of can't get rid of reds without adding cyans. Now I said that my photo has this like aqua cast to it, so I probably wouldn't want to add cyan. The other thing that I wanted to show you is you can change it in this tone, I think it's, what's it called? Yeah, the tone drop-down menu, shadows, midtones, and highlights. So you can change the color balance in the highlights differently than the midtones and differently than the shadows, which I think is really useful. But let's start out with the midtones. So, right, I said that it kind of has an aqua hue to it, so I'm going to increase the red a little bit. Now, if I go too far, look what happens. My photo gets pink, right? I don't want that. This is like a fine adjustment here. Okay, let's turn this on and off. That right there already warmed it up a little bit. It's a little too pinky up in the sky for me, so I'm going to bump it down. Let's see what that did. Yeah, that just took a little bit of it out. I think that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to add some yellow to really warm it up, right? So, there, right? And remember, this is all subjective, right? Color is subjective. You can make a photo that looks like this, right? You see photos like that all over the place on Instagram, all that stuff. You know, Lightroom is really easy to do this type of edits with, so you see that a lot in Lightroom. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Let's just look at that. So that's just the midtones. It just got rid of the aqua. I mean, it still needs a little bit more to get rid of the aqua, but it's a lot less, and it warmed the image up a little bit. It kind of seems like, without it, it kind of seems like midday. With it, it kind of seems like sunset, like that warm light of the sunset. So now let's go into the highlights. I'm going to warm up the highlights, not make the sky pink. So once again, this is really subtle. I'm not going to mess with magenta or green, because my problem with this was the kind of aqua, and so that's the cyans and the blues. Well, that's pretty good to me. Let's go before and after. It's a lot warmer of an image now. And now let's go shadows. And I'm going to do the same thing with the shadows. Warm them up, right? And it is an aesthetic choice. Like I said, you can make your images. You didn't sign a contract to make your images realistic looking, right? There is no such thing as realistic looking. So you can use these tools however you want. But that right there looks pretty good to me. I mean, we started out after my, all my big edits with this photo, which I think it's a fine photo, right? It just seems like kind of that harsh midday atmospheric haze, just kind of blue everywhere. And by just kind of adjusting the color balance to warm up everything and get rid of the cyan and blue in the midtones, highlights, and the shadows, it kind of changed the feel of this photo. It kind of seems like it is like the last rays of the sun, right? Like that the sun's low on the horizon, really warm light. So color balance is really useful. I would say that I probably use color balance when I'm editing color pictures. I would say like, I don't know, maybe on 10% of my images, but it is a really useful tool. So the other thing that I want to cover is sometimes you guys get stuck on, you click around too much and you end up like this, and you click around, you're like, wait, where is the properties window? So you're always in every layer you have remember that you have two different parts of the layer. You have the mask and you have the adjustment. So if you ever lose the adjustment, the properties window, it's because you're clicked on the mask. So make sure to click over to the properties window. And you can tell where you're clicked on because of this white bracket. So remember that. That's like a really helpful thing that I know sometimes gets confusing. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Bye.